Hey everybody, it's InnoVision, and lately I've had a ton of folks in the community asking me what my thoughts are on AMD's FSR 4.1 upscaling technology. More specifically, they're interested in what does it do for you, how to enable it, what settings I'm using, and whether or not there's any performance impact. In today's video, I'll be sharing all of those things across 3 different devices, each with very different performance characteristics. We'll be taking a look at the settings and side-by-side gameplay comparisons across the Legion Go 2, the original Legion Go, and the Steam Deck. Each of these devices have various performance characteristics and capabilities. Grab you something to snack on and something to sip on, because we've got a lot to unpack here. Here we have a very interesting side-by-side comparison of the FSR upscaling algorithms running on my Legion Go 2. Note that I'm using the Perforomance TDP preset. Going from left to right, we've got FSR 3.1 quality, 4.1 performance, and 4.1 quality. Pay close attention to Diana's hair as she tilts her head from side to side. Immediately, you'll notice that the 4.1 algorithm has a lot less spatial aliasing and artifacting of her hair. It's nuts that the performance mode of the 4.1 algorithm has better visual fidelity than the quality mode of the 3.1 algorithm. Another thing we'll see later in the video is that the 4.1 performance mode has similar performance characteristics as the 3.1 quality mode when we start looking at FPS. 4.1 quality mode is visually stunning compared to the other 2 modes, but it does come at a performance penalty. With the settings I have here today, it's still quite playable though. We still stay above 30 FPS. As we get started, it's worth calling out that FSR 4.1 was not originally intended for gaming handhelds, but there's been enough interest in the gaming community that folks in the community have been able to enable these features. And it seems like AMD is not going to gate this feature any longer. I suspect this feature will be rolling out to Proton and have general availability at some point. At this point in time, there's a few different approaches for enabling the feature. One of them is using a Deculoader plugin known as Upscaling. I have another video on the channel showing how to set that up. I don't tend to use that plugin because it's a little bit hard for me to read, and I wanted something a little bit more simpler and just an easy way to kind of A/B test things without having to go through too many parameters. And so the approach I'll be sharing today is how to enable it through the Proton game compatibility layer that we find on SteamOS and other Linux-based gaming distros. Taking a quick look at our settings, we've got HDR set to auto, which effectively turns it on. If we go under our graphics options here, we're using borderless window 1920 by 1200, which is the full resolution of the Legion Go 2 display. One important note here is for our upscaling tech, this needs to be set to FSR 3. Super Fidelity Resolution 3 mode. If you set it to performance, it'll run a little bit faster, but the image quality will be more decimated. And so you can try playing with balanced and quality. I'm going to roll with performance because there's already a nice uplift in terms of graphics and visual fidelity just by switching to FSR 4.1. Everything else is pretty much the stock settings here whenever I've enabled 8 gigs of VRAM in the BIOS. Here we have a comparison of the 2 FSR upscaling algorithms while playing Pragmata on our Legion Go 2 using the Perforomance TDP settings. From left to right, we're looking at FSR 3.1 quality versus 4.1 performance. This was selected by design. Earlier in the video, we saw that 3.1 quality had worse visual fidelity than 4.1 performance. 4.1 performance is where I feel most gaming handhelds will benefit from this technology. Looking at our Steam performance overlay in the top left corner of each of these scenes, we see we're trading in anywhere between 5 to 7% of our performance for the 4.1 algorithm. Personally, I feel like that's a small price to pay for the improved visual fidelity over the 3.1 quality version of the algorithm. What does everybody else think about this performance trade-off? Drop a comment, hit me up, and let me know. If 60 FPS is an absolute must, there's other tricks you can pull here. For example, I'm using the full resolution of the Legion Go 2 display. Rather than target the full resolution of the Legion Go 2 display, you can lower the game's resolution. But once you do that, you might start approaching the same visual fidelity we see with 3.1 quality. It is worth experimenting. For those of you out there who don't know what FSR is, it stands for Fidelity Scaling Resolution. And this is AMD's upscaling technology, or answer to NVIDIA's deep learning super sampling. Effectively, what it does is you render your game at a lower resolution, the frames of your gameplay go through an upscaling algorithm, and out comes a more beautiful or refined version of that image. Classically, FSR has used spatial domain or temporal domain transformations to predict what that image would look like. FSR 4 is a step into the direction of using AI to upscale the image. We've got our graphics set up in windowed mode at 1280 by 800, and we're going to be using integer scaling. I'm going to go ahead and kick it up to the performance TDP setting, because that's what we use across the board. And let's go ahead and change our scaling to integer here, and I'm going to use the FSR sharp filter. And so coming back into our graphics settings, you've got frame rate set to variable. FSR 3 is toggled on, but if you look on the right here, you can see it's 4.1.1, and we've got it set to performance. And most of our settings are high or medium. These are mostly defaults. And so we're ready to play the game. Let's take a look at our two FSR upscaling algorithms on our original Legion Go. We're using the performance preset for our TDP setting. And on the left, we got FSR 3.1 quality. And on the right, it's 4.1 performance. With the Legion Go in hand, it's pretty obvious that there's a visual fidelity improvement while using the 4.1 algorithm. It'll be a little less apparent by the time the video hits your screen due to compression artifacts and things of that nature. I'd encourage you to give it a try on your Legion Go because you really will see a difference. One thing that is truly obvious from a comparison like this is there's virtually no performance degradation by using the better algorithm. We might see slightly few FPS, but we're talking about less than a 2 to 3% difference here. And there's a logical explanation why. On the Legion Go, we're using integer scaling. That means we've decimated our image quality by 2x in both the width and height dimension of our image. In other words, rendering at 800p puts our resolution similar to what it would be on a Steam Deck at 720p. So there's a lot less work on the iGPU here, which means that we can sustain higher frame rates. That would also mean it merits visiting other image resolutions on our Legion Go 2. So far, I'd highly recommend at least giving 4.1 a try if you have a Legion Go or Legion Go 2. And the reason you may want to use an upscaling algorithm, it comes down to performance. Your system has to work less because the game is rendering at a lower resolution, and the upscaling typically happens in hardware. Usually it's not that expensive, but sometimes it can be. But more specifically in this video, I wanted to find a set of settings that the game was still very playable and felt very smooth, but also looks visually stunning. All right, let's take a look at the settings we're using with our Steam Deck. So we're using borderless window, we're using the full resolution of the Steam Deck display. VSync is disabled. Global illumination's high. We're using FSR 4 with performance mode. Remember, FSR 3 is used to toggle FSR 4 with our override to Proton. And so we're using the performance upscaler, and we do have frame gen enabled. And for hair quality, we have high, and everywhere else kind of a mix between high and medium. These are more or less the Steam Deck defaults. And so you can see we're just under our 6 gigs of VRAM for this game. If I toggle our performance overlay off, we're using FSR 4.1.1 and it's in performance mode. And you can see it's still the same late June build. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of our two FSR upscalers running on our Steam Deck. We're using all 15 watts of the Steam Deck's TDP, and this is a very interesting sample for several reasons. Not only is the Steam Deck the original gaming handheld, it's also the less powerful one that I tested here today. On the left, we've got FSR 3.1 quality, and on the right, we've got 4.1 performance. With respect to the other handhelds we've tested here today, there's not as big of an uplift in terms of visual fidelity when switching to FSR 4.1 on the Steam Deck. But something that's extremely interesting here, I also don't see as big of a performance degradation. Oddly enough, I see bigger swings in performance with FSR 3.1 than I do with 4.1. With 3.1, it seems like we're achieving higher FPS sometimes, but then it drops right back down to a similar FPS that we see with 4.1. One way to interpret this is maybe there's not as big of a performance penalty for using 4.1 on the Steam Deck, and there could be many reasons why. For example, the Steam Deck has the lowest resolution display of all the handhelds we tested here today. Another thing that comes to mind is the fact that SteamOS was originally made for the Steam Deck. I'm curious what everyone else out there who's using FSR 4.1 on the Steam Deck has experienced. Drop a comment, let me know. I'd love to hear more about it. For the remainder of the video, I'll be sharing how to enable FSR 4.1, and this applies to any SteamOS or Linux-based gaming distribution so long as you have an AMD GPU or iGPU. Enabling FSR 4.1 on your device is pretty straightforward. There's a few different approaches. One of them applies it at a global level so that any game you launch will have the settings, but the approach I prefer is on a per game basis. That way you can kind of try it out, see the settings, see if you like it, or you can just turn it off, and that's what we're about to see right here. So the first thing you want to do is head over to desktop. Once you're on your desktop, you want to go to the Discover App Store, and we're searching for a package called Proton Plus. As a side note, I find it's always helpful to have a mouse and keyboard handy when you're doing stuff like this. And so what you see here is a power cable coming into my device. It's hooked up to a dock that's providing me access to Ethernet as well as my mouse and keyboard. And so you can see I already have this installed here, Proton Plus, but if you don't have it installed, you'll click on it. And once you've clicked on it, instead of launch here, you'll see an option to install. And so I already went ahead and installed it because I've been using it for quite some time. I have other videos on the channel that show you how to use this tool if you're interested in checking those out. You can actually use different versions of Proton to enable FSR 4.1. I like the CashOS Proton. Click into Proton-CashOS, Proton CashOS latest. You are able to use older versions like these ones that have the date appended to the Proton name. I use Proton CashOS latest, which always points to the latest version of the Proton payload. And so if you ever want to know if you need to update it, you can click refresh and saying, hey, we have no updates here. Open Steam and go to your library and find a game that you know has FSR 3 already enabled that we want to promote it to FSR 4.1. I'm going to go all the way down to Pragmata. Now once you're on your games page, you'll click the gear icon. So once you open your game's property pages, we're going to go to launch options. And these are command line arguments that we want to pass to Proton before we launch our game. What we have here is Proton underscore FSR 4 underscore indicator equals 1. This is just saying, hey, I want to see an indicator while I'm playing my game that shows me that it's actually enabled. The next one is Proton underscore FSR 4 underscore upgrade equals 0. You're going to want to set this one to 1. And then the next one is Proton underscore FSR 4 underscore RDNA 3 underscore upgrade equals 0. We're going to want to set this one to 1 as well. This is the important bit on our Legion Go 2 or any other gaming handhelds that are currently in the market. This is saying we want to promote RDNA 3 devices to use FSR 4. And then the last bit here is %, command, %. That's just the game's executable. And don't worry, I will actually have this exact command in the description of my video. And so what's really neat about this is if I want to disable the indicator, I just set this to 0. If I want to disable using FSR 4, I'll set it to 0 here. One thing we'll see in a little bit when I test this on my gaming PC is I don't need this Proton FSR RDNA 3 upgrade part of the command. I would just use this one only. And so that all looks good. You'd go ahead and add these command line arguments to any game that you want to promote from FSR 3 to FSR 4. And for now, I'm just going to stick with Pragmata. One last thing that we need to check here is that we're actually using the Proton CashOS. So I'm going to go under Properties and then Compatibility, and you'll notice we've got this option checked here, Force Use a Specific Compatibility Tool, and it's using Proton CashOS latest. And so you'd normally click down there and get a drop-down list of all the different Protons installed on your device. And so this is actually another way to toggle FSR 4.1 on and off. By unselecting this, it'll go back to the stock Proton version that ships with SteamOS. So what did everybody think about these results? Drop a comment, let me know. I'm truly enjoying FSR 4.1 performance mode on my Legion Go 2 while playing Pragmata. There's several other games that this works for. For example, any of the Insomniac games like Ratchet and Clank, or the Insomniac Spider-Man games like Miles Morales, they all work with this upsampling technique. I'd have to double check if it works with God of War. By the time I post the video, I'll have a list, or at least a link to a list of games that are supported. If you use the OptiScaler plugin, you should be able to enable it for all games. The plugin is powerful as it is a little bit clunky for me, and I prefer just the simple approach of using the Proton compatibility layer. Has anyone out there tried OptiScaler? What's been your experience with it? Drop a comment, let me know. And just so you know, we've got a community Discord server that's free for any of our subscribers. That's where all the cool cats hang out. In fact, the discussion that led to today's video happened while on Discord. Until next time, hit that like button, subscribe, hype the video. That way you don't miss all the amazing tech, toys, and gaming tips we've got coming down the pipeline.